I should have seen it coming. Hindsight makes fools of us all, right? But at the time, I was too wrapped up in the excitement of my wedding to realize the storm that was brewing. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, I want to share another touching story with you. Before we continue, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Every day I share interesting life stories with you, so enjoy listening. Let me set the stage. I, 29F, got married to my husband, Jake, 31M, a few months ago. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I had spent months planning every detail, making sure the ceremony was perfect. It wasn't extravagant, just a cozy, intimate wedding with close family and friends. Or so I thought. See, the problem wasn't the wedding itself. It was my sister, Emily, 27F, and my parents. Emily has always had a way of making everything about her. I should have been used to it by now. If I got an A on a test, she got an A+. If I got a promotion, she had somehow gotten a better offer somewhere else. Our entire lives, my parents had compared us, subtly, of course, but always in a way that made me feel like I was just a step behind her. And then there was my mom. My wonderful, controlling, manipulative mother. She swore she only wanted what was best for me. But what she really wanted was control. She never liked Jake, never thought he was good enough for me. According to her, I should have married someone more ambitious, someone with a real career. Jake owns a small but successful photography business, which apparently wasn't impressive enough. I tried to ignore the warning signs leading up to the wedding. The snide remarks about how my dress wasn't as flattering as it could be. The passive-aggressive jokes about how Emily was so happy for me, even though she never imagined I'd be the first to get married. The weird energy in the air whenever my family was around. I should have known. Then the wedding day happened. Everything started smoothly. I was nervous but excited, holding Jake's hands as we stood at the altar. But right in the middle of my vows, I noticed movement in the crowd. Whispers. Murmurs. My dad suddenly looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. I should have kept going. I should have ignored it. But something in me just knew. And then Emily stood up. In the middle of my vows. Wait, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I have something to say. Everything stopped. The officiant. The guests. Even Jake looked frozen in place. I will never forget the way my mother looked at me in that moment. Like she knew. Like she had known this whole time. And then Emily said the words that shattered everything. I'm pregnant. I swear to God, it felt like time itself stopped. Not just because of what she said. But because of who the father was. Jake's best friend. His best man. I don't remember dropping my bouquet, but I must have because I saw it later, crushed on the ground. What I do remember is the silence, thick, suffocating, and somehow louder than if someone had actually screamed. Emily was standing there, hands on her stomach, smiling. Like this was her moment. Like she had just announced something wonderful instead of setting fire to my entire wedding. And my mother? She looked so damn proud. For a solid 5 seconds, nobody moved. My brain was still catching up, still trying to process what had just happened. And then, like clockwork, the whispers started. Jake's best man, Daniel, turned pale. Like ghostly, about to pass out pale. He had been standing right next to Jake, and now he looked like he wanted to bolt. Jake, on the other hand, was frozen. Not in a guilty way, in a furious way. What the hell is wrong with you, Emily? I finally managed to say, my voice shaking. She blinked at me, all fake innocence. What do you mean? I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her and shake her and ask her what kind of sick game she was playing. But before I could, my mother, my own mother, stepped forward, putting a hand on Emily's back like she was some fragile little angel. Sweetheart, don't make a scene, Mom said to me. To me. Not to the sister who had just dropped a nuclear bomb in the middle of my wedding. Not to Daniel, who was practically hyperventilating. Not to my father, who was standing there with his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might shatter. No. She was telling me not to make a scene. I felt my entire world tilt. Did you know? I asked my mom, my voice eerily calm. Mom hesitated. Just for a second. And that was all I needed. I laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh that felt like it was coming from someone else. You did, I whispered. You knew. She opened her mouth, probably to spew some more manipulative garbage, but I was already turning to Emily. When were you planning to tell me? I asked her. Emily sighed. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I was going to tell you soon, she said. But, I mean, what better time than now? I wanted to share my joy with everyone. I felt something snap inside me. She wanted to share her joy. At my wedding. With my family. With a man who had stood next to my fiancé, who had given a speech about loyalty and brotherhood the night before at the rehearsal dinner. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, Jake finally spoke. This is a joke, he said. His voice was low, dangerous. Tell me this is some kind of sick joke. Daniel was still staring at the floor, but Emily? Emily had the audacity to roll her eyes. Oh, come on, Jake, she said. It's not that big of a deal. Jake moved. Not toward Emily. Toward Daniel. And suddenly, all hell broke loose. If there's one thing I know about Jake, it's that he's not the type to lose his temper. He's always been the level-headed one, the guy who can handle pressure, who can walk away from drama instead of feeding into it. But at that moment, he looked ready to kill Daniel. He lunged. Not a wild, reckless attack, no, this was controlled fury. He grabbed Daniel by the collar of his tuxedo and slammed him against one of the decorative pillars near the altar. Gasps rippled through the crowd, chairs scraping as people instinctively moved back. You slept with my fiancé's sister? Jake's voice was so sharp it could have cut glass. Daniel didn't answer. Probably because he was too busy trying to breathe. Jake, stop. I snapped, finally shaking off my shock. The last thing I needed was for this day to end with an arrest. Jake's jaw was clenched so tight that I could see the veins in his neck. His fists were white-knuckled, gripping Daniel's collar like he was debating whether it was worth it to throw a punch. But then Emily, freaking Emily, had the audacity to giggle. Relax, Jake, she said, flipping her hair like this was some dumb high school drama. It's not like he cheated on you. I swear to God, if looks could kill, she would have evaporated on the spot. Jake let go of Daniel with a sharp shove. You're unbelievable, he muttered. I turned to Emily, my hands shaking. Why? I asked. Why would you do this to me? She scoffed, crossing her arms. God, don't be so dramatic. It just happened. Daniel and I have a connection. I nearly laughed. A connection. That's what she was calling this? But before I could even process what to say, my mother decided to make things worse. She stepped between us, facing me, her expression calm. Too calm. Sweetheart, she said, using that fake soothing voice that always made my skin crawl. I know this is upsetting, but maybe we should all just take a deep breath. This doesn't have to ruin the wedding. I stared at her, convinced I had misheard. Are you serious? I asked. She actually had the nerve to sigh. Your sister is pregnant, honey. Maybe we should be happy for her instead of focusing on, I don't even know what happened. 1 second, I was standing there, staring at my mother like she had lost her damn mind, and the next, I was laughing. It wasn't even a normal laugh. It was hysterical. The kind of laugh that bubbles up when you're so far past the point of anger that your brain just short-circuits. I bent over, clutching my stomach, because this was insane. This wasn't happening. This wasn't real. I straightened, wiping at my eyes, and looked at my mother. Really looked at her. You knew, I said. You knew this whole time, didn't you? She hesitated, again. And that was it. That was the moment I knew. She hadn't just known. She had been waiting for this. Emily was still smirking, standing there with her perfect little oopsie pregnancy, and I finally understood. My mother had always favored her. Always. She had spent our entire childhoods making excuses for Emily, defending her, covering for her, pushing me aside every time Emily wanted something I had. And now? Now she had let this happen. Jake's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "We're done," he said flatly. Everyone turned to him. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Daniel. Daniel swallowed hard. Jake shook his head. "No. I don't want to hear it. You're dead to me." Daniel's face crumpled, and for a second, he actually looked like he might cry. But I didn't care. Because I was done, too. I turned to Emily and my mother, and I made a decision. This was war. I don't remember much about the rest of the ceremony because, well, there wasn't one. The moment Jake said, "We're done," everything started unraveling at lightning speed. The guests didn't know what to do. Some of them sat there in stunned silence. Others started murmuring, looking anywhere but at the disaster unfolding in front of them. A few, mostly Jake's side of the family, got up and left. I don't blame them. But I wasn't leaving quietly. I turned back to Emily, my mother, and Daniel. They had humiliated me. In front of everyone. They thought they had one. They thought I would just cry and leave quietly. Not a chance in hell. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and did something I never thought I'd do. I grabbed the microphone. The one the officiant had been using. The entire room went silent again. Even the ones who had started gathering their things froze. Emily shifted uncomfortably, probably sensing she was about to be in deep, deep shit. I tapped the mic twice. "Well, that was unexpected," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Guess we're skipping the vows and going straight to family announcements." "Great. Let's talk about what else everyone should know." Emily's face drained of color. Daniel, that absolute idiot, took a step forward. "Maybe we should just," I held up a hand. "Shut up." And God help me, he did. I turned back to Emily, gripping the mic. "You want to make announcements at my wedding? Let's talk about a few things you forgot to mention." Her eyes went wide. "Don't." "Oh, sweetheart. You don't get to say don't after what you just pulled." I smiled, really smiled. "I'm curious, Emily. Does Daniel know about Aaron?" She froze. A few people gasped. My father let out a sharp breath. Jake looked at me sharply, then at Emily. "Who's Aaron?" "Oh, I was enjoying this now. Funny story," I said, my voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Aaron is Emily's ex. The one she was very much still seeing a couple of months ago." I turned back to Daniel, whose forehead was already slick with sweat. "And I could be wrong, but wasn't that right around the time you two got together?" Daniel's head snapped toward Emily, his face an unreadable mix of anger and disbelief. "Is that true?" Emily stammered. For the first time in her entire life, she didn't have a snappy response. I wasn't done. "Oh, and Mom," I said, turning to my mother. "Since we're being honest, should we talk about how you were pushing me to call off this wedding for months?" Her jaw clenched. "I was just trying to control me?" I interrupted, tilting my head. "Make me miserable because you can't stand seeing me happy?" She actually had the nerve to roll her eyes. "You're being dramatic." "Maybe." I shrugged. "Or maybe I'm just finally seeing you for who you really are." At this point, Emily was practically shaking. I could tell she wanted to scream at me, but she couldn't, not when she had just been caught in her own web of lies. So I twisted the knife one last time. I took off my engagement ring. The one Jake had given me. The one that was supposed to symbolize a future that Emily and my mother tried to destroy. I stared at it for a second, then turned to Jake. "You still want to marry me?" I asked him. He didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. "Yes." The room erupted. Jake's answer, his immediate, unwavering yes, should have made me feel victorious. I should have been relieved, should have felt like I had won something after all the chaos. But as I stood there, in the middle of a wedding that had already gone to hell, I realized something. This wasn't how I wanted to start a marriage. I looked at Jake, really looked at him. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark with lingering rage. He wasn't standing there as my soon-to-be husband anymore. He was angry. Angry at Daniel. Angry at Emily. Angry at my family. And most of all? Angry for me. But anger wasn't a foundation. It wasn't something to build a life on. Jake saw my hesitation and immediately stepped closer. "Hey," he murmured, voice soft enough that only I could hear. "I meant it. I still want this. I still want you." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. I know. And I did. I knew he loved me. I knew he was ready to stand by me, no matter what. But was I? Before I could say anything, Emily finally snapped. "Are you serious?" She shrieked, her voice a full octave higher than normal. "After everything I just said, you're still getting married?" The sheer audacity of that statement made me laugh. Not bitterly. Not angrily. Just exhaustedly. I turned to her, feeling an eerie sense of calm settle over me. "That's what's bothering you?" I asked. "Not that you just announced your pregnancy in the middle of my vows? Not that you've been sleeping with my fiancé's best friend? Not that you completely humiliated me in front of everyone I love?" She opened her mouth, but for once in her life, she had nothing to say. And then my mother, because she just couldn't help herself, decided to throw in her opinion. "Honey," she said, using that same sickly sweet voice she always used when she was about to manipulate me. "Maybe Emily has a point. Maybe you and Jake should take a step back and really think about—" "No," I interrupted. "No, you don't get to do this anymore." My mother stiffened. "Do what?" I exhaled sharply, gathering every ounce of strength I had left. "Control me. Manipulate me. Act like you know what's best for me when all you've ever done is push me aside for Emily." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not true." I laughed. "Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it sure as hell looks like you're proud of what Emily did today." Silence. "And that?" That was my answer. I turned to Jake. His hands were still balled into fists, but when I met his gaze, he relaxed just slightly. I took a deep breath. "I love you." Jake's expression softened. "I love you, too." I reached up, touched his face, memorized the warmth of him. And then, I took a step back. Jake frowned, like he knew what was coming but didn't want to believe it. "What are you doing?" My hands were shaking. My heart was breaking. But I knew, deep down, this was the right choice. "I can't marry you like this," I whispered. "Not today." A sharp gasp echoed through the room. Emily's mouth fell open. Daniel looked relieved. My mother looked triumphant. And Jake? Jake looked devastated. Jake's face shattered. Not in an obvious, dramatic way, he didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't demand an explanation. That wasn't him. But the way his shoulders tensed, the way his lips parted like he wanted to say something but couldn't, the way his eyes darkened with something between pain and understanding, it was worse than if he'd screamed. I had just broken his heart. And mine. But I couldn't do it. Not like this. Not with the weight of betrayal and humiliation and rage pressing down on us. I took another step back, putting just enough space between us that I felt like I could breathe. "I love you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't marry you like this. Not today. Not like this." The entire room was dead silent. I could feel everyone watching, holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next. And then, Emily started laughing. Of course, she did. "Oh my God," she cackled, shaking her head. "You're actually serious? You're really just gonna, what? Call off your wedding and leave?" She was acting like this was her win. Like she had gotten what she wanted. I turned to her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No exhaustion. Just cold detachment. You ruined my wedding, I said, my voice steady. You made my day about you, just like you always do. But you know what, Emily? I tilted my head, watching her smug expression waver. I don't care anymore. She blinked. What? I don't care, I repeated. You can have your scandal, your little victory. You can enjoy every second of this moment. I smiled, and I knew it wasn't kind. Because this is the happiest you'll ever be. Her smirk faltered. She knew exactly what I meant. Because she had nothing else. Her entire life, she had defined herself by being the center of attention, by stealing the spotlight from me. She didn't know how to exist without making me the villain. But now? Now, I wasn't playing the game anymore. I was done. I turned to my mother next. She was watching me carefully, her expression unreadable. But I could see the slight smugness behind her eyes. Like she thought she had one, too. And maybe, for a long time, I had let her believe she was in control. Not anymore. I exhaled slowly. I hope it was worth it. She frowned. What are you talking about? I gestured vaguely to Emily, to the wreckage of what was supposed to be my wedding. This. Everything you've ever done to put her above me. To push me aside. To make me feel like I would never be enough for you. I smiled again, this time, sadder. I hope it was worth it. Because you don't have a daughter anymore. My mother's face dropped. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked away. Jake caught my wrist. Not tightly. Just enough to make me stop. Wait, he murmured. His voice was rough, raw. Does this mean we're over? I hesitated. I loved him. God, I loved him. But I couldn't marry him in the middle of this disaster. I covered his hand with mine. No, I said softly. We're not over. But I need time. We both do. Jake searched my face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. I squeezed his hand one last time. Then I let go. And walked away from my own wedding. Walking away from my wedding was the hardest thing I had ever done. Not because I regretted it, I didn't. But because the moment I stepped out of that venue, the weight of everything crashed down on me. I had just burned every bridge with my family. I had left Jake standing at the altar. I had thrown my entire life into chaos in the span of an hour. And yet? For the first time in years, I felt free. Jake and I didn't talk much after that day. Not because we were angry, but because we needed space. I stayed with a friend for a while, ignored the flood of texts and calls from my mother, which ranged from furious to weepy guilt trips, and tried to figure out what the hell came next. But while I was healing, Emily was unraveling. I heard about it through the grapevine, first from mutual friends, then from my father, who had quietly reached out to say, I don't blame you for what you did. Apparently, my little speech at the wedding had done more damage than I thought. See, Daniel had been too stunned at the time to process what I had said about Aaron, Emily's ex. But after the wedding? When the adrenaline wore off? He started asking questions. Emily must have panicked, because she denied everything. But Daniel? Daniel wasn't stupid. He did what any suspicious man with a cheating, manipulative partner would do. He got a paternity test. I don't know if Emily actually believed she could lie her way out of that one, or if she was just so convinced she could keep controlling the narrative. But when the test came back? The baby wasn't Daniel's. And guess whose it was? Aaron. Yup. Her ex. The one she had been seeing while she was with Daniel. It turns out, she hadn't just screwed over me, she had played both of them. And Daniel? He lost it. He dumped her immediately. But not quietly. I wasn't there to see it, but from what I heard, it was brutal. He told everyone, his friends, our old college group, even his boss, what she had done. It spread like wildfire. Emily tried to spin it, of course. tried to paint herself as the victim. But no one believed her. Even my mother, who had spent her whole life defending Emily, was struggling to clean up this mess. And me? I was thriving. Because while Emily's life was falling apart, mine was slowly coming back together. Jake and I started talking again. Slowly. Carefully. We met up for coffee, spent time together without the pressure of the wedding looming over us. And the more we talked, the more we realized we still wanted this. Just on our terms. No family interference. No drama. No Emily. And then, just when I thought things had finally calmed down, I got a text from my mother. Your sister needs you. Please call me. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I blocked her number. Blocking my mother's number was something I should have done years ago. The moment I hit that button, I felt something inside me unclench, like I had finally taken the first deep breath of my life. But of course, cutting her off didn't mean the drama was over. Because Emily? She wasn't done yet. A week after I blocked my mother, Emily showed up at my apartment. I wasn't expecting her. I had just gotten back from dinner with Jake. Yes, we were taking things slow, but we were rebuilding. And honestly? For the first time in forever, I was happy. Then came the knock at the door. And there she was. She looked like hell. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smudged like she had been crying, and she was wearing one of those oversized sweaters she only pulled out when she was completely spiraling. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. What do you want, Emily? I asked, keeping my voice calm. She exhaled sharply and crossed her arms. I can't believe you just left. I blinked. Are you serious? She scowled. You abandoned me. You left me to deal with all of this alone. I stared at her, absolutely stunned by her sheer audacity. You mean the mess that you created? The mess you chose to make? Her jaw clenched. You don't get it. Everyone's turned against me. Daniel left, Mom is, she stopped herself, shaking her head. It's all falling apart. I shrugged. Sounds like karma. Emily's eyes flashed. You think you're better than me, don't you? No, I said simply. I think I finally see you for what you are. Her mouth opened and closed, like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. For the first time in our entire lives, Emily had nothing left to say. I sighed, suddenly exhausted. Go home, Emily. For a moment, I thought she was going to keep pushing. To scream, to cry, to beg. But she didn't. She just looked at me, eyes unreadable, then turned and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. It's been 6 months since I walked away from my wedding. Jake and I? We're engaged again. But this time, we're doing it our way. No big wedding. No toxic family. Just us. Emily moved out of state. No one really hears from her much anymore. And I'm okay with that. As for my mother? She still tries to reach out. Sometimes through emails, sometimes through my father, who, surprisingly, chose to stay neutral in the aftermath. But I don't respond. Because I've finally learned something, family isn't about blood. It's about who actually loves you. Who actually shows up for you. Who doesn't try to break you just to feel better about themselves. And the people I left behind? They were never my family to begin with. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. And before you go, check out the video on your screen. It's another heartfelt story you won't want to miss.